Hey guys, Colin Elam again, aka the Musket Man, and I am back for episode 13 of Gun Table Talk. If you stuck around to my last episode about being on the Muzzleloaders podcast and you stuck to the end for the sneak peek, I mentioned the Schofield. Well, I'm back halfway through the week and we're going to talk about the Schofield. So, anyway, guys, without further ado, thanks for joining me. All right, guys, as you can see right off the bat, and I try to get them better where you can see them the best, we're going to be talking about the Schofields, or Smith&Wesson and the Smith&Wesson Schofield. So this is going to be going over like a brief history because Smith&Wesson and Schofield and all the models, there was a bunch of them. It gets a little confusing. So I'm just going to make it really brief for everyone to understand. And we're just going to go over the guns themselves generally and just how they work and the differences between the models and everything like that. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, guys, so if you watched my previous episodes, I've gone over like cap and ball revolvers, mostly black powder guns that you would have to load from the front of the cylinder, stuff like that. My other episode, I talked about the Cattlemans, which were one of the early model of handguns to come on the scene that were cartridge guns. Well, these Schofield, or the Smith&Wesson, were actually before the 1873 Cattleman. Believe it, they came out almost 3 years before that gun. And they were one of the first guns, handguns, to come on the scene that took a cartridge. Before that, it was paper cartridges or loose powder and ball. But this was one of the first handguns to come on the scene that was made for a hard cartridge. So this one, which is technically a Smith&Wesson. This is not, most people know it as a Smith&Wesson Schofield. But technically, this model, and those who know a little bit about firearms, this is just a Smith&Wesson top break. Now, both of these guns here are made by Uberti, and they're chambered in 45 Colt. Pay attention to that because I'll get to that later. So anyway, guys, as you can see, this is a very, very pretty gun, very well made. Uberti does a fantastic job on these. They do not make their guns cheap, and they try to be as accurate to the original guns as possible, and I love that. So as you can see, this was a top break. So if you're used to the Westerns or anything like that, they were having to load through the side, extract a spent casing. Well, that took a long time. Well, this gun changed a way of reloading quickly and unloading quickly. So this is a top break revolver. As you can see, it breaks in half. So before this, Smith&Wesson had made some other revolvers. They were more pocket guns. Like in the late 50s, they weren't as widely known. They were successful, but they weren't as known as these. So this is technically, like I said, just a Smith&Wesson. So the original caliber, or I'll get to that later, hold on. So with this gun, this is a 5-inch barrel model, and most of them would have been, 5-inch to 7.5, some an 8-inch. So as you just saw, broke it open. Well, if you can get a close look at this latching system. Now, some of you might be wondering, Colin, what keeps the gun from falling apart when you shoot it? Well, as you can see, I've got the gun in half cock, and this particular latching system, which is also your rear sight, you just simply, and sorry, my thumb's busted, pop it up, it releases, and as you go, see this? That is your shell casing extractor, so when you're empty, you push, 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 clicks out all 6 of your empty shells, which allows you to reload a whole lot quicker than the guy with the Cattleman or even a cap and ball revolver. Really increased your reload speed. So, as you can see, people love this immediately because it was just a superior handgun. Now, with this particular model, and I'll go over real quick, when you break it open, or I'll go over this. So here's full cock, shoot, we'll release it all the way down. As you can see with the hammer all the way down, like I was saying earlier, you cannot release this. Cylinder won't spin, won't pop open, nothing I can do, you're completely safe. It can't pop open. As you see, there's a little tooth that grabs on. So you have the kind of the female end meets the male end. That is what latches and secures your barrel from breaking open while shooting. As you can see, again, pops open, clicks back into place. And then when you get ready, you cock it, you fire it. So it was a very quick concept. So with this, you couldn't beat it. It was the best sidearm probably in the 19th century for its day. But there was one problem. with this particular latch is these guns were made for cavalry use. They were made to be worked hard. And what would happen sometimes is this latch would eventually wear out because they would slam it over and over and over to reload to get your shots off. Well, eventually it would wear out, and then the gun and barrel was real loose, so you lost all your accuracy. So that was one major problem. And even with these reproductions, if this little lever wears out, you can replace it. What you got to really worry about is these teeth back here and built in the frame, looks like SpongeBob's teeth. You got to be real careful with those. And I don't recommend you slam this shut every time. Just kind of gently do it every time, or you can slowly, lower it down. That's also something you can do. But that was a problem that they ran into. Another problem was the sights. Like I said, the rear sight is part of that latch. And it's like your front sight meets two thin caverns. And a lot of the soldiers didn't like that because they felt you really had to aim straight and true to get that to work. And they felt like it wasn't as fast a firing rate to get a more accurate shot off. So there was some room for improvement. Well, a man by name of Major Schofield, which was also a cavalryman, he loved the Smith&Wesson break actions. He loved them a lot. And he was a firearms enthusiast, and he liked to tinker. Well, he got with Smith&Wesson. He bought a lot of them, sold them to his soldiers, but he kept 6 for him because he wanted to tinker with them and see what he could do to improve them. And that's where you get the Smith&Wesson Schofield. So technically what happened was when they went to the U.S. government to put these together, they had to open up the handgun contract with the U.S. government because before then they'd been using Colts. Well, Schofield came out with his, and what he did was he fixed the latch to make a stronger one and improve the sights a little bit better. Well, when it came time to it, Schofield presented their gun. They liked it, but they didn't like the issues they had. Schofield presented it, and it was a Smith&Wesson just with the upgraded latch and sights, and they loved it. They knew it was the next firearm to go with. Well, Smith&Wesson was not very happy. And of course, there's more history that ties into that later, but we're going to go more over the guns. So anyway, when Schofield got with this, that's when he developed this latching system that's a little bit better. So same deal, put it to half cock, which in this one will actually free up the cylinder. And now, in one motion with one hand, you can crack it open. Because now you can get your thumb up here with this latching system to put it back. When you load up all 6 shots, simply with that tooth, see how it comes up together? Comes back just like that, grabs a hold. And just like the other one, bring it to full cock, release it, the hammer sits down where it cannot be broken, open, cannot be released, anything like that. So you could still hold 6 perfectly and you're ready to go. So that was a major upgrade. So that is why you hear these called the Schofield or the Smith&Wesson Schofield, which is technically what this one is, which is a Model 2. There was a Model 3 and even a Russian model. That's a topic for another time. I don't have those examples. We're just going to be going over these real quick. So, same deal. Half cock, break it open, kicks out your shells, breaks it open, you can reload real quick. So we talked about the latching system just a while ago. Well, with this upgraded latching system, as you can see, it could withstand the heavier use by the cavalrymen. So if this tooth ever wore out, which also holds the cylinder in place, you could simply take that off, replace it, put a new one on, and you're back in business. With this one, it was a little bit harder to find the replacement parts just because of its design. Now, this one's also by Uberti, a little bit longer barrel. And I just got this at the Lubbock Gun Show last weekend. These guns are hard to find. I was very lucky to find one. Very, very blessed. And now I've got 2 of them as a dynamic duo. So this one would have came out a little bit later, which, by the way, they were making these and this that looked like this from 1860 all the way to 1915. So you might have seen a guy on the battlefield of World War I carrying a Schofield. In fact, in the video game Battlefield 1, this is an option for one of your sidearms is a Smith&Wesson Schofield. So, little history lesson there. If you've ever played the game, you know what I'm talking about. In fact, it was one of my favorite sidearms when I played the game back in the day. So, anyway, like I said, Uberti makes these perfect copies. Now, they're both chambered in .45 Colt. Well, that didn't exist. Now, back then, they wanted the guns in .45 Colt. But Smith & Wesson did not want to make their guns in a caliber of a competitor, which was Colt. But they decided to make a .45 caliber. So they came out with a .45 Schofield, which is basically a .45 Colt just cut down about 1/8 of an inch. That's the only difference. So technically, these being .45 Colt, you can chamber, you should be able to, .45 Schofield into these cylinders, and they should work just fine. It's just like .357 and .38 Special. Same deal. So if you can't find one or the other, you've got two options for calibers for both of these guns because they're chambered in .45 Colt. And they chambered them in a bunch of calibers with the reproductions, .38 Special, .357, 44 Special, 4440, .45 Colt, .45 Schofield, and there's a couple others as well. But mostly what you're going to see is .45 Colt. So, again, I love these guns. And also one thing I didn't cover on the Schofield, he changed the sight picture. Let me cock it. And by the way, none of these guns are loaded. So as you can see, it's a much fatter rear sight. And it's got a V kind of in the back. That allowed the soldier to get the gun up a lot quicker and in line with sight to fire, increasing his rate of fire and accuracy. Let me get the Smith & Wesson model. As you can see with this one, again, gun is not loaded. It's like teeth. And a lot of the soldiers and cavalrymen mostly that were carrying this didn't like that. Now, me on personal preference, I like them both. I like both of the sights. These things are so deadly accurate. This one shoots about 1 inch high, almost point of aim, just like this one. These are ridiculously accurate guns, even for today's time. Highly recommend these works of art. Now, as a matter of finding these guns, they are incredibly hard to find. With everything going on in the gun world right now, these all got bought up and they're harder to get back in. They're harder to get a hold of. I was lucky enough to find one. First time in 3 years I found a Schofield at a gun show. And I found it for a great price. It was used, but they took very well care of it and it was for a good price. Needless to say, I bought it up real quick. So if you're looking for one of these or want to have one, there's plenty of websites out there, but you're going to be looking for a while. So it's really just who you know to get your hand on a Smith & Wesson or a Smith & Wesson Schofield. And they come in a variety of barrel sizes, I believe 3 inch, 5 inch, 7, 7.5, and even 8 inch. So there's different varieties and there's different models too, as you saw with the different latches and different calibers as well. And as you'll see with the Russian model and the third model, there's some minor differences, but overall they function the same. So anyway, guys, I can't recommend this gun enough. I kind of had to rush because there's a lot to talk about these guns. But anyway, guys, I'm about to run out of time. I thank y'all so much for sticking with me with another episode of Table Talk, and we talked about a really good gun here today. I possibly might make a part 2 because I'm running out of time here, so I might do that in the future, but leave a comment down below. If you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for joining me, guys. Remember, I'm the Musket Man. Keep your powder dry. We will catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for watching. See you later. Hey guys, Colin Elam again, aka the Musket Man, and I am still back for episode 13 of Gun Table Talk, part 2, talking about the Schofields. As you can see, I'm still wearing the same shirt. Simply, I ran out of time in the first episode, so I wanted to go over some things about the guns in general, these reproductions, that I didn't get to talk about in the first part of the episode. And also, before I begin, guys, I recommend y'all go onto YouTube and check out Duelist Den 1954, aka Mike Bellevue. He has a 35-minute long video over the Schofields and the entire history from start to finish. So if you want to learn more about the history of these guns, I recommend you check out that video. He's got more time and he's got more information at his disposal, and he's got better cameras and stuff to edit that I don't have. So if you want to learn more about the history of that, I recommend you go check out that YouTube video. And there's also one by Rock Island Auction that is also very good and well information. So go check those out if you want to learn more about the history. Well, anyway, guys, let's continue part 2 about the Schofield. So anyway, guys, like I said, there was some stuff I didn't get to discuss on these particular guns because I ran out of time simply. So I thought, why not? I'll make a part 2, and I'll try to get part 2 out about a day after part 1. So it's not going to be like it's next week when I post it. So anyway, just look out for that. So anyway, guys, we'll go back to the Smith&Wesson first model. I know there were some things I covered in part 1 if you were paying attention. What went on with them, the sights, kind of the latch, how it functioned, how it worked, everything like that. Well, simply, I'm just going to start off with that. So we already talked about the latch and the sights and everything like that, how it functioned. You put it in half cock, you break it open, kicks out your shells, everything like that. Well, I kind of want to go over some certain things that some people don't know about this guns and some that are actually myths about this gun that you may not have heard of or may not know. So like I said, right off the bat, and even ties into history, disassembling this gun is actually not that hard because it is a closed frame. All the internal parts are protected. Since they would have shot black powder cartridges back in those days, which, by the way, both of these will shoot smokeless or black powder, just depends on your preference. I will say, though, black powder cartridges do get a little more gunky in the Schofields than they do the Cattleman's or other guns I've seen. After 6 shots, you reload, you have to rotate them. They're kind of hard. The only one that doesn't have as much problem, I've heard, is the Russian model. But for some reason, these have issues. So just know that if you're going to shoot black powder cartridges. So, like I said, disassembly. The internal parts are protected, so really you don't have to clean them unless you're shooting this a wicked amount. Then every so often you got to take this plate off, which is quite simple. It's just 3 screws holding in. Plate pops off, everything in there. You can take it apart, oil it, grips come off, just held in by a screw. Very easy. But one of the things that was kind of difficult was the cylinder. And let me see if I can get it in the frame. As you can see, right there in the back, there's a little pin that holds the cylinder in place by this screw, and also the side screw that is the latching system in the rear sight. So it can be a little difficult to get that off sometimes, especially if it's fouled up real bad. And that was also a problem for the first model originals that Schofield ended up fixing for Smith&Wesson. Not in a way they liked, but he did fix it. So that is the same for these reproductions. They can either be very easy, but if they're gunked up, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get that out. But once you get the cylinder off, it is easy to clean out the bore, easy to clean out the chambers, re-oil it, put it back together. It's a lot easier than, let's say, your Cattleman or your cap and ball revolver. It's not as many parts. It's really almost just cylinder, barrel, and frame. That's it, unless you completely disassemble it, which you don't really have to do that unless it's incredibly dirty. So just know that for the Smith&Wesson first model, if that's what you want to call it, but Smith&Wesson break action, just know it's going to be a little bit difficult. Also with the latching system from history. So this was meant to be a cavalry gun. Well, Schofield, the guy that designed this, he wanted one where you could do it one-handed, where you could open up one-handed in one motion. With this Smith&Wesson, you have to use your offhand to pull that latch up, then break it open to release the shells. So it took 2 hands. Well, that was harder and hurt your reloading time. And for a cavalryman, you had to have something easy to reload and to keep firing. So that's when he came up with the different latch system, like I said in part 1, that fixed that. So something else I'm going to talk about that goes into both of these guns. And I'm going to switch guns just so I, handle in both of them. So like I said, he fixed that latching system. As you can see, we discussed it. Same deal, half cock. But now, like I said, you could throw it across your leg, pop it open. Now you're unloaded. So you put your gun in your offhand with your reins, and you're reloaded and still riding and knowing where you're going. You couldn't really do that with the first one. So that was a major game changer when Schofield got a hold of this. And like I said, we went over the cylinder being removed from the rest of the frame and the barrel. Well, as you can see this, like I discussed in part 1, the tooth here that holds the barrel and cylinder to the rest of the frame, it's one piece. All you have to do, and there's 2 screws holding it, all you have to do is loosen that front one all the way out, pops up, cylinder comes off. Easy as that. Clean it, re-oil it, slap it back on, tighten that screw back up, and you're back in business. And like I said, if these are to break or wear out, it's easily replaced to get your gun back in the system, back going again. So that's not that big of a deal. Also, something different on the Smith&Wesson Schofield is the grips. So as you can see, they're both on either side. Again, gun is not loaded for your fingers. So it's a lot more comfortable to hold, and again, gun's not loaded, but for your fingers to be held on the grip. It is way more comfortable. On the Smith&Wesson early models, you can see they're fat. They didn't have that. So not that it's unbearable or horribly uncomfortable, it's just you didn't have that luxury, but you did with the Smith&Wesson Schofield. So you did have that, and it was a lot more comfortable. What were the disadvantages of the Smith&Wesson and the Smith&Wesson Schofield? The one con everybody said was, look at where the hammer is at. When you grip these guns, you have to get your thumb way up there to cock it. Well, what happened to your grip? Your grip moved all the way up the gun, then your fingers all the way across the trigger, so you got to readjust it. And that was with basically most of the models. That was the one major con they had. But that's also why they put the inlay in the grip, so when it moved up, it was more comfortable. And by that time, you were so accurate, it really didn't matter. So there's something to look for versus your cattleman on these particular guns. So anyway, that's the major differences between the 2 firearms. Again, same caliber, same manufacturer. You birdie, keep up the good work. Love it. The sight picture, we discussed that. Because this was a fatter sight, again, gun not loaded, it was a lot easier for military use to get it on target. And even me with the reproduction, it lines up almost exact every time. But even with the more older sights, they still line up very good, and it's still deadly accurate. So I really don't have a personal preference. I like them both, in my opinion. Some people may differ from that. So again, I've discussed in past episodes cowboy loading. Well, yes, there is a way to cowboy load the Smith&Wesson or the Smith&Wesson Schofield if you so choose, or you're in cowboy action shooting. And that is simply, you load up 5 and you leave this empty chamber, which would be on your left side. You leave that empty. So when you close it, you cock it, you're on an empty chamber, you let it sit down, chamber's locked, cylinder's locked, nothing's going to happen. Now me, if I'm carrying a 6-shooter, I am going to carry 6 shots. I don't care who you are, I'm going to. Now there is a myth about these guns that I'm about to share with you. So you might have heard people say, you don't ever load 6 guns into a Schofield or a Smith&Wesson because when you slam that cartridge is going to go off in your hand or your... Let me stop you right there. Maybe in early models that might have happened, the originals, but not even then they happened. So this is not only a half-cock position. There's all the way down, like I said, locks it up, but half-cock. Now, anybody knows about half-cock position on these single-action armies? Frees up the cylinder. Well, kind of the same concept. The cylinder is freed up, but your hammer is locked in place. I can't push it forward. The trigger's locked. There's no way that hammer can fly forward. So when you break it open to load, you can load 6 shots safely. And as you can see, let me see if I can get the shot in there. See the little hole? That is where the firing pin comes out of. It is like, it's back in there. So there's no way this fixed firing pin can hit a primer. So you're completely safe there. So when you close it, you can safely have 6. Now what people don't like, they're like, well, the cylinder still spins. True, the cylinder will still be freed up, but it's okay. It's not going to harm the gun. It doesn't matter if it clicks over a ½ inch. It still will cock every single time. It is the same with the Smith&Wesson early model as well. You do not have to worry about closing it and the gun going off. That is a myth. That will not happen. If for some reason your gun will not stay in the half-cock position, you can't even open the gun anyway. And if it's not doing that, you know better than to be going shooting it anyway. So that is also a myth, and I'm going to switch guns again just because so I show both of them love, that you'll hear about the Smith&Wesson or the Smith&Wesson Schofields. That is simply not true, especially with the reproductions. So be on the look for an Elmer Fudd that's telling you, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. How dare you? You're going to blow your foot off. No, you're not. No, you're not. And I'll even show you. Same deal. It was already in there, but look, halfway, like we discussed, locks it, latch stuck, cylinder stuck, half cock. And sometimes this one gets stuck. Sometimes it frees it up. This one's a little different than the Schofield, but this one right now is locked up. But look, right there. I cannot, there's no, it is completely safe to have 6 loaded right here. For some reason, sometimes the cylinder's freed up on this one, sometimes it's not. So that's also your half-cock position and also your safety position. So know that. You can safely carry 6. You're not going to blow your foot off. And the last thing, I've got just a couple more minutes. So let's say you've loaded all 6 and you cocked it and you shot 1, cocked it again, shot 2. And you're like, you know what, I'm done. Well, like I've discussed, break action, open up the front. And here's another example. See, I have to use my offhand to crack this one open. That was a major difference, as you can see. So as we discussed, pull, 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 kicks your shells out. But let's say you only shot 2 and you have 4 extra rounds in there. But you go, man, I want to take those shells out. Well, that is where on the bottom, this little button lever comes in handy. And the Schofield has it as well, and so do the other models. Well, what is this? So let's say I fired 2, got 4 rounds left, but I don't want to crack it open. Because if I crack it open, it's going to spill the other 4 cartridges on the ground possibly. Now, here's what you do. So you simply crack it open, and you see where my thumb's at. I push up. See what happened? It disengaged the bullet extractor. So now nothing happened. You just opened it. So now you can take those loose cartridges out by hand, reload them. Some guys will crack it anyway, and the loaded casings will fall back into the cylinder, and the other 2 will fly out. That's another way to do it. I can't be effective with it. I've tried. Doesn't really work for me. So that is another way you can do it, and it's on every model. So again, let's show you again. Boom, boom. I want to reload too. Okay. Push up. Disengages it every time. So it's just that simple because it's spring-loaded in the bullet extractor. So all the models are like that. And as you can see, slamming it, that's why if extreme use, they got worn out quickly. But anyway, we've already discussed that. So that is mainly it. All the things I wanted to go over about the guns and less of the history. So if you ever get your hands on one or a buddy, family member, you go out shooting, you can prove to them, hey, I know what I'm doing by watching this video. And there's others on YouTube as well that you can look after. So anyway, guys, I'm about to run out of time. I hope this part 2, just like part 1, was educational. Thanks again for watching. I appreciate it. If you liked it, like the video, share it, leave a comment. If you've got any questions, let me know. I will answer them the best as I can. Well, anyway, guys, I'm almost out of time. Remember, I'm the Musket Man. Keep your powder dry, and we will catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time, guys. Thanks.